I'm so tired of World War III.
All right, we are live Sunday evening, 5/25, 2025, the 5th anniversary of the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin psyop. Does anybody here think that that was real? Is anybody here under some kind of delusion? And the best that I can find are people suggesting that Chauvin didn't kill him, that fentanyl did. Like, that's pure guardrail misinformation. And it makes you look bad because now you're standing on the side of the person who's obviously the bad villain in the story. I was thinking about Derek Chauvin and this archetype, this bad cop thing, and how it's surfaced in various movies. For example, Rebel Ridge, which aired days before Tyreek Hill was yanked out of his car by some bad cops. And I want to do some juxtaposition between the James Cameron evil cop Terminator 2 and Derek Chauvin. And we've talked about this before, but it's notable that James Cameron was filming Terminator 2 about this evil cop, which was kind of a novel thing at the time. And some bystander watching the filming is the one who recorded the beating of Rodney King, which, of course, we all know kicked off the riots. Okay, so let me go ahead and see where we're at as far as the live stream goes. I see about 15 people in chat. I got this report last night just after our live stream. The ceiling collapsed during a showing of the new Final Destination movie. Now, this is not the only ceiling collapse that we've talked about recently. During a premiere of Captain America, a theater ceiling collapse, and it was called the Liberty Theater, and it was in Washington, which are pretty significant to the plot of the story and the wider metascript context, because Captain America has Harrison Ford as a president being shot at while he's at a podium. And the trailer for that was altered because it so closely approximated what happened the day after the trailer came out. Notable, too, the shooting was in a theater, so there's kind of a connection. And, of course, Harrison Ford Theater, little Abe Lincoln connection. And you could even add into this that Harrison Ford was born on July 13th, the day of the shooting, and the birth date of Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar in the Park was being performed in 2017, where Trump was represented. He was Caesar. And Laura Loomer, no less, jumped on the stage to interrupt it. She considered it to be stochastic violence. It's interesting to see how far back that particular character has been associated with Trump and the foreshadowing for this event, this impending event. And this is a major thing. We're talking about 9/11 scale psyops that changed the whole world. And the movie Final Destination that we've been analyzing lately has all these themes. That's why when the Space Needle blows up, they show the penny. The penny is what starts it. And what does the penny represent? Well, Abe Lincoln, Civil War. And there's a lot of fascinating connections between the assassination of Abe Lincoln and that of JFK that have been pointed out. And these aren't coincidences. It is script, meta script. And so I'm just pointing out that it goes back so far that when we're looking at this story, that Abe Lincoln is tied into it shouldn't shock us at all. In fact, the USDA had that big banner with Trump's face on it that was highly criticized because it looked fascist or something, is what they were saying. And it was adjacent to an image of Lincoln. So I was pointing it out. What's with this association of Trump and Lincoln? And there's already been plenty of associations with Trump and JFK. But the JFK-Lincoln stuff, of course, all correlates here. So we're talking about the Harrison Ford being shot and the alignments between that event and the Trump shooting in Butler. And if you missed it yesterday, I was talking about Mickey 17, where Mark Ruffalo plays a Trump-esque character. And a Luigi-esque character, played by Robert Pattinson, the main character. If you look at the trailer, he's got a hoodie. He looks like Luigi. That's what I saw in the first trailer. I said, hey, look, this movie's got some Luigi-type character. So let's see what happens. And sure enough, Mark Ruffalo plays a Trump. And if you watch it, it's very obvious. Even in the way that he talks, you can tell he was watching The Apprentice and immersing himself in Trump to portray this character. And he's shot at, and the bullet grazes his cheek, so he's got blood on his cheek. Sound familiar? And this movie was already produced before Trump was shot at last year. And after Mark Ruffalo as Trump is shot at by the Luigi character, he demands the cameraman focus on him and take some PR shots of him, posing with his bloody face. I mean, that's exactly what happened in Butler. These are what the media would call eerie coincidences, and what truthers would call evidence of a simulation. Of course, they're both wrong. But this theater collapse story went viral. People that I know who don't even watch the news, who have no idea about any of this stuff, have mentioned this. Oh, did you hear about this? Which has all the hallmarks of it being a PR stunt. All right, let's see who has joined us. We got 40 people have already piled up in here. Last night's archive, Infinite Plane Saturn Day, will hit your inbox. It's already scheduled. And along with it is a synopsis. So I've been using Notebook LM to take my YouTube videos or the transcripts and then give me a synopsis with links and then bullet points with the topics. So anytime you get the newsletter with the archives, you can scroll down to see what we talk about, timestamps, points that were made, and relevant links. It's one of the great things about AI is it's just such a labor-saving device. I don't need an entire staff, which is what it would have required to do a lot of these things. And it's necessary for search engine optimization, and so we don't get co-opted. Because what we're doing is very unique, singular, and there really is no opposition to it. Because we're really playing with fire when it comes to the PSYOP entertainment complex. And I think we're just going to remain unacknowledged, the perspective that we bring. But as more people arrive at this, and this is irreversible, it's going to be something, I don't know, we'll see. I'm curious to see what kind of damage control you could implement when a lot of people become truly skeptical. And I think the deep fakery makes our claims even stronger these days. You know, people used to question, what do you mean the news lies? They hire actors. It's like, it's way beyond that now. And people have never been more visually illiterate. I've made this point before, that through the centralized media worldview monopoly, they've managed to create a society of visual illiterates who can no longer tell real from fake when it's on a screen. And it's not just because of the special effects. A lot of it is just because of the argument from authority, the trust that they have, the faith in what is presented. But this is a reality compromise. And the reason why it matters is that, well, one, we've already been tremendously deep faked. But two, it kind of makes the case for us here, for skepticism. We're no longer looked at as conspiracy theorists for saying that the news media is engaged in systemic fakery. In fact, someone posted something in the Discord, in the Gilded. It was, I think it was Frank. Let me pull this up. And I'll have to read it in its entirety. Some Marshall McLuhan and others, just some commentary about simulation, specifically with regard to the atom bomb. Because that's something else I talk about. I consider the atom bomb to be a God construct. Like the atheists don't believe in God, a storm God that might flood the world. They don't believe in the devil or heaven, but they believe in these counterparts. Aliens are angels to them, for example. These are like, analogs. We've talked about the space as heaven, Gaia, with its built-in flood myth. But the nuke itself constitutes something of an angry war god or something of the like that people literally believe in. They genuflect. It's called ducking and covering. Okay, so here's what Frank Murr posted. This is from Politics, Power, and the Simulated Event, from Watergate to Nuclear Deterrence. So this is about a theory of simulation to the realm of politics and global power, revealing how scandals and threats can function as simulations that reinforce the existing order. And what we're looking at here is, and I'll probably read into this later, but just an article describing the power of illusions and how there's a point where it doesn't even matter Doesn't matter. And I often point out, too, that you can find people with discernment who can clearly articulate why the Trump assassination attempt was fake, and yet they are incapable of attaching it to the bigger conspiracy that it would necessarily involve. I want to continue through my notes before we get down any of these trails too deep, but this is just a fascinating breakdown here because it talks about the long-term consequence of the belief that we're all being held hostage to maniacal dictators with the power to blow up the world or ignite the atmosphere. That's a God construct. By the way, I was looking at the intro to the Elvis movie because someone had asked about Jurassic Liars yesterday, and I was thinking about how when we first started talking, or I first started listening to him, he talked about this concept of Elvis and his association with the Space Needle and the first televised polio shot and these other connections he was making. And interestingly enough, there's a montage which you can find on YouTube, the intro to the Elvis movie. And it shows you the International Hotel and these three pillars in front. And on top of the pillars, it has the Starship Enterprise. And so it looks like the Space Needle here, which is essentially a UFO atop a tripod. And then, I go through the various pictures on our Gilded server. I did some screen caps from it. But then you can see a sequence where it goes, the camera angle goes into the Space Needle, and then it becomes an eye. Like an iris, an eye. You have and then it shoots over to Elvis, who's being given a shot because he's unconscious. And as they stick the needle in him, they're playing the song, the intro song to Space Odyssey, 2001. So connecting all of this, we were talking about the significance of the Space Needle in Final Destination, and the main character's name is Iris. She's the one with the prophetic vision about the Space Needle being destroyed. So I'm thinking back, and the movie opens where Iris is blindfolded, which has to have some significance since her name relates to vision. So Iris is blindfolded, and she's brought to the tower, the Space Needle. And it's the opening night for the sky view. And then he pulls the blinders off her, and she sees the thing. So then Iris goes up, and she has this vision of the thing falling. But another connection here, just 2 days ago, the real Space Needle just opened Skyliner, which is this double-decked glass elevator. Like, interesting timing. This movie comes out, and as it's reaching its peak viewership in the theaters, the Space Needle opens up, and the movie is about a 1968 opening of this elevator, this Space Needle, but it just perfectly correlates with what just happened in real life. Calm Down says, in Vegas, it's called the Eye in the Sky. I've actually been on that one before. Well, we'll get back to the other stuff I was alluding to, but let's continue to go through the notes here. I'm just pointing out some stuff related to the Space Needle because all of it seems relevant right now because of that movie in particular. And then we got into a discussion about someone had mentioned Travis Scott because at the Astroworld event, you had those people who were crushed to death. So I did a little digging just to kind of look. I'm taking advantage of Perplexity. If there's anything we talk about here, you can find it on Perplexity. And I'm making it a point to get my receipts. So this is a screen cap from his video, Escape Plan. So if you're not familiar with the story, Travis Scott was giving a concert called Astroworld. And during the concert, initially as reported, like 9 people were crushed to death by the mob itself. And he's just standing there watching, looking over this thing. And this event was, very psyop-y. But people noticed that a couple days before, he releases a video for Escape Plan. And in the video, he's wearing a Pearl Jam shirt, which references the Rock Slide Festival, where 9 people were crushed to death in another crowd crush. So Rock Slide was alluded to in Escape Plan and then it happened at his concert. And a number of people have noticed here the eerie parallels between the Astro World tragedy and the year 2000 Rock Slide Festival. So what's the connection? Well, a number of people have noted this stuff. It goes deeper into the symbolism of Astro World itself, which is an intriguing psyop to look at. I believe Benjamin Crump shows up. A lot of people are saying, "I can't breathe." It had a lot of hallmarks of being fake. And there was someone who's probably been censored since, who went to the morgues trying to find evidence that these people had actually died, and it turned up nothing. Calm Down says, "I meant the constant cameras everywhere. It's called the eye in the sky." Oh, yeah. Yes. Speaking of cameras everywhere, I was watching violent videos on X today, and I asked Grok, I was like, what is the likelihood that if I die a violent death, that it will be recorded on camera and possibly TikToked and Twittered? And Grok said that in an urban public setting with a high camera density, there's easily a 20 to 50% chance that your violent death would be caught on camera. Not that it would do me any good, but we'll continue to talk about what Frank Murr posted regarding the writings of Baudrillard. And this is all stuff about simulation. Very intriguing stuff. If signs and symbols substitute for reality and bypass a genuine process, then reality itself becomes something that is managed, controlled, and operated through its simulated double, rather than something that is directly experienced or organically unfolding. This sounds to me like the metaverse, and the metaverse becoming dominant over the meatverse. Or how much of our information is outsourced and second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand. What's up, CMGZ510? Finally caught us live. Yeah, I'm going to be consistent now on evenings. It's a little sporadic, but I was just developing some projects that had to be done. You may notice behind me, it's a little dark, but I'm keeping it dark for a reason. There's some hobos in the neighborhood, and I'm realizing here, I'm the only one here late at night, and if I leave the light on, it kind of gives away where I am in the building relative to my vehicle. So I think it might be kind of smart for me to not advertise when I'm exiting and leaving with the light being an indicator. Kind of like in The Walking Dead. You got to be cognizant of what's outside. Joe Fiore says, "Is there any significance to Travis Scott appearing on WWE?" Absolutely. So Travis Scott appeared with Rock, and they bashed that guy in the head, and one of them popped his eardrum, the other one gave him a black eye. So think ear, eye, foreshadowing Trump, and the belt that he hit him with had the date of 6/11. Jurassic Liars called in about it. There's quite a bit. So we were talking about this idea here of having the public moved into a simulation, which is fine. It's efficient. It says here, this operationalized reality is more efficient, predictable, and controllable for systems of power. It allows for the manipulation of perceptions and outcomes without needing to engage with the complexities of the real. And this is not a new concept. We've talked about the writings of Polybius describing this notion of the instrument of monarchy, the terror of gods, because, as he wrote, superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. So the terror of the gods is implemented because, in their view, the masses are lawless, fickle, violent. So you control them through fear, through God constructs. And so, to my earlier point, I've been saying that the nuke is a God construct, that the atheists don't believe in gods. They're not God-fearing, but they're nuke-fearing. They're Gaia-fearing. Same thing. Same exact thing. We're talking about worldview warfare and the few controlling the many by manipulating them through a simulation. Goes on to say, If individuals are constantly interacting with an operational double that has replaced the real, it becomes difficult to gain critical distance or challenge the system from an outside perspective. Individuals are already within the simulated systems, making it hard to discern its artificiality or question its legitimacy. The very tools for critique are part of the simulated system. This is the trap of alt media. And this is why I point out that we take the off-world stage perspective, because challenging it from any anti-position is part of the simulation. That's why I'm always critical of antis. I have a little ebook I put out called Anti-Anti. It's not enough to be anti the pro position, anti-media and whatever they promote. You have to be anti the alternative media as well. So anti-pro, anti-anti. That's the off-world stage perspective, and it's the only one that gives you the distance, and we do have our own lexicon to describe what we're saying, to be able to challenge the thing from the outside. And it's purely an intellectual challenge. It's a philosophical distance. We're not talking about... I'm not anti-media. I mean, it's just the state religion. What are we going to do about it? But I'm a non-believer. Not only I'm not just a non-believer in any of its God constructs, but I question the legitimacy of its priesthood. But we're not here to wake people up, because there's a whole path. There's a process that you can't really do it for anybody. But what we can do is we can reach out to those who've seen through the mainstream lies and have figured out that alternative media is just alternative lies. Those are the ones who I think are close enough to the edge to jump over those final guardrails and reach the off-world stage perspective. And once you do, you will not be inclined to go back. You'll notice a lot of people who question NASA, even though they don't have an alternative model, they still don't trust, they still don't go back to, oh, well, everything NASA says is suddenly true. Except for Jared. He's the only one who made that illogical leap. But, well, we know. And he's still mad at flat earthers, by the way. Whenever I need to laugh, I go to his Facebook account. And he's mad that some people are still flat earthers. I'm like, what do you expect? Flat earther is a misnomer. It's just a word they use to malign critical thinkers with functioning bullshit detectors who don't have enough information to arrive at an alternative to what has been served. So we're in this zone, the suspension of judgment. It's not indecision. It's not fence squatting. No, this is a calculated suspension of judgment. And I plan to know more in the future. And so I'll give you my answer in the future. But what has been provided is insufficient for me to give an answer confidently. Jungle Jim says Roswell's a tough town. Roswell's great. They have this thing called I think it's called the Dog Bowl or the Wolf Bowl. It's a big dog park, like a big fenced-in area where people just let their dogs run. And then everything there is aliens. Even the traffic light, the street lights are like alien heads. I had to drive over there to transport a body. I think the funeral home is called Grams or something. I used to do body transport, funeral home to funeral home. So I had to drive out to Roswell, and I went to the one where allegedly the alien autopsy happened. Although we all know that was a big scam. But it's a tourist town. Everything there is like alien cyber cafes, and I don't have a problem with it. There's this sign. I have a picture of it somewhere. It's kind of bizarre. It's like this alien, like large-breasted, like Baphomet alien, and he's holding up a Dunkin' Donuts sign. I went to Roswell when they declared lockdowns. So everybody's locking down, and I'm like, okay, I'm taking a road trip. So I took my stimmy check, and I drove to not just Roswell, but the place where the craft landed, because the alien craft landed in Corona Field. And so we were making these connections. Well, what's up with this UFO? And see, 'cause the UFO is built into the Space Needle. And the idea of course, the tractor beam, beaming people up. So there's this connection between the needle, and we've been following this thing, and this idea of the injectable, perhaps the alien as a virus, which is one of the themes in this movie that came out in 2020 called, it was the Russian movie. It came out, it was called, see if I can pull this one up. Sputnik. And it was actually the same month that Putin released Sputnik 5. So he releases the COVID vax, and then a movie called Sputnik comes out about this alien that infects the astronauts like a virus, but then it grows in this symbiotic relationship and takes up residence in the esophagus. And then while the host sleeps, it crawls out and finds a victim. And then it assumes its full-blown reptilian form, which scares the crap out of the victim, and it feeds off the stress hormones, the cortisol, and then it eats them. And it turns out that the government made a deal with the aliens in exchange for technology. And the governments of the world are feeding a certain number of their prisoners to the aliens, like every day. All right, moving down. Calm Down says, I got off the freeway somewhere in Albuquerque, got some McDonald's. It was sketchier than South Central. Just don't stop at the Walmart off the freeway if you're just passing through I-40. That's where people who get road rage on the freeway stop and they fight it out. Like there's this recent, it was they start the fight on the freeway. They stop in the Walmart parking lot. It's two brothers against one guy. The guy ends up shooting one of the brothers and then ramming his car into the guy, pinning him against the truck. And then the dad shows up and he kills the guy in the car. And it's all on camera. And then like a week later, I hear about this incident of a road rage fight breaking out in a Walmart parking lot. And let me guess, it's the Coors Walmart. Like whenever I hear of some big crime or a murder or something, I'm usually guessing neighborhoods, and pretty accurately too. But it's not as bad as it looks in Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad is often cited as by some as a documentary, but no, it's just very selective. Dominic says, I'm anti, trying to wake people up to convince them they were brainwashed fools, they wouldn't dare go there. Jungle Jim says, once you go raft, you don't go back. Well, we will be coming back once the raft is so big. That's why I have this image of the Kraken, the penguin Godzilla. The idea is once we have a large enough self-aware demographic, then things can get interesting. Because I'm interested in the damage control. I'm interested in the debate and the propagandists being exposed as such. I mean, what are they going to do? And it's always an open, it's an interesting question. You find out somebody is possibly a propagandist, an agent, and you just try to find out, are they legitimately promulgating this belief? Is it ego, or are they being paid to do it? And so we're going to find out who's being honest as time moves forward here. As the guardrails are exposed, like anybody still saying false flag is questionable. Why would you say false flag? The only people who say false flag are alternative media operatives and propagandists, probably ignorant of the significance of that term and why it's so wrong. It's a loaded term. The idea of calling it a false flag implies that people really died, that the event was authentic, a real terror attack. But calling it a false flag just says the media is lying about who did it. So they have this mainstream version and the alternative version. But both of them agree the thing happened. So if you're using the term false flag, you're already co-signing on the reality of the event. That's not skepticism. Jungle Jim says, I remember the Art Bell alien metal story. Well, the alien mythology all comes out of the Air Force. And I point this out, but so many people just believe in it. Like they want to believe. And Joe Rogan wants to believe. I often hear videos of Joe Rogan. I have one, I think, on my Twitter here, where, he wants to believe. He was disappointed when he was talking to the Egyptologist. He was disappointed to find out that they can accurately explain and replicate the methods that go into building pyramids. That this is a human technology. Joe Rogan is disappointed that it wasn't aliens or giants, at least. A lot of people just want to believe, and I understand why it's a cool story. And some will even go so far as to say, like Neil deGrasse Tyson said, that it's not even scientific to deny aliens, because the universe is so big that to deny aliens would be like putting a bucket of water in the ocean, drawing it out, and concluding that there are no whales. Like, that was his analogy. And I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's right. But they'll say that, yeah, obviously there's got to be life out there somewhere. Well, then why not angels? But again, angels, aliens, it just depends on whether you're a progressive utopian or you have these traditionalist mindsets, or it's a mix. Like, aliens are real, but they're actually demons. And that's the new talking point from the right. And I think it's interesting, too, that the same people who promote alien phobia, extraterrestrial alien phobia, are also scared of AI, or they promote AI phobia, like it's Skynet or Hell 9000. And these are talking points, propaganda narratives. Calm Down says Rogan is carrying on Art Bell's work. Right, platforming ideas that don't challenge the dominant paradigm. Because none of the mainstream conspiracy theories challenge anything at a fundamental level. They don't get into the fakery, they indulge in it. And Art Bell and Whitney Strieber wrote the first climate change book, climate change fiction. It was called The Coming Superstorm. And Whitney Strieber's the guy who claims that he was abducted by aliens who probed him, which ties back, I think, to the idea of fallen angels, the Watchers, mating with human women, hybrids. It's all kind of built in. It's a repackaging of these older myths. But the fact that he claims that he was abducted by aliens and probed and all that, his book is called Communion, just tells me he's an intelligence agent. Disinformation. I mean, I want to believe that he was probed by aliens as much as the next person does, but I just don't think it's true. And they always talk about like the missing segments of time, like you're picked up by an alien and you wake up in a field and you don't know where you are. And I've actually encountered people who've experienced that. They call in and they say, I saw the ISS. I'm like, what did you see? Lights in the sky. Where were you? Longitude, latitude. And they're like, I don't remember. Okay, well, that's not a very viable observation to make if you can't tell me where you were. You just saw a light in the sky. It sounds like somebody who was abducted by aliens. And I consider it to be a comparable claim. Like, ufology is not an ology. And that should be clear. It's not a rigorous study. This thing that happened in Jersey with all the airplanes being misidentified as drones and flying saucers, that proves that the public there isn't like a consensus of UFO believers that are doing legitimate science. It's really just a superstition at this point. It's a government-created superstition and mythology. But it's also promulgated intentionally. Like, I encounter people on X who are debating chemtrail people. And what I'm pointing out is that these chemtrail people who are always asking questions like, what's up with that cloud? They ask the question because it's a loaded question. It's a strategy. They keep asking the same question year after year. I mean, it's just for decades they've been asking, what are they spraying? What's that cloud? That's not a legitimate question because it's already been answered. It's a loaded question that implies it's not known. But that loaded question framework is what keeps this thing alive. And this isn't grassroots. There isn't some grassroots group of people noticing something in the sky. No, this is a top-down propaganda narrative that's being targeted at this particular demographic. And this is exactly what they did with the UFOs. The special agents, the special operations in the Air Force were actually targeting conspiracy theorists with stories about UFOs, about flying saucers from Venus, about underground military bases in Dulce, New Mexico. They were targeting them with these propaganda narratives to discredit them as witnesses to anything they might see coming out of the Air Force Base. So that's a strategy that shows that the government uses propaganda narratives to neutralize certain dissidents and free thinkers, or people who are noticing something they shouldn't notice. And what I'm noting here is that the chemtrail conspiracy is inorganic. It is an active measure. There are government agents behind it. There's no legitimate reason to believe in it. So there's an account, Take That Clouds. He asks, why can't these cretins look it up for themselves? And the cretin he's talking about is Lisa Hawk. And she says, can somebody tell me what kind of clouds these are? It's like, just ask Grok at this point. Grok will tell you anything. And Grok will look at these images. I mean, there are books on clouds that have existed before airplanes that document every single one of these. But what I point out to Take That Clouds, because he's always mad at the chemtrail people, I point out to him is that the question itself is the strategy. It's an appeal to ignorance and a loaded question. It's not a bunch of random morons, but this is the psychological operations, and it's not grassroots. Jordan Peterson was in a debate today, or yesterday, and it was Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists. And the atheist he was debating asked him for his thoughts on Mary from the Bible. And Jordan wouldn't answer. And then he wouldn't affirm that he's a Christian. And he's been looked at as having lost the debate. But I dug into it, and Jordan Peterson has never claimed to be a Christian. He's like on the path, is how he describes it, or he's close to it, but he's not quite there. So it's kind of a misrepresentation. But it just got me thinking about people like Russell Brand and Candace Owens that I consider to be performative Christians. That they are transitioning to Christian in public for clicks. And it's part of this broader culture war. It's part of the embrace of traditional values that's tied into the right-wing side of the political horseshoe. It's part of what's now being called by some as the woke right. And at the same time, Joe Rogan is going to church. And this is being spread like a big rumor. It's a big deal. He's going to church. So the point of it is, he isn't a Christian technically because we're watching him go through this scripted and fake transition. It's purely performative. And I said this. I said that his Christianity is performative like that of Russell Brand and Candace Owens. And Candace Owens fans have been kind of flaming me in the comments here. You know, how dare I say that they're not real Christians? How can I know? Well, it's because these are all individuals who are part of the PSYOP entertainment complex. Nothing they do should be considered authentic at this point. These are parodies of extremism. At best, they're pose. And I'll play this little clip so you can just hear, because what I hear in this conversation is someone who's being entirely disingenuous. Like, he could answer it. He could say, I'm not Christian, but he gets kind of defensive about it, and I think he's lost a bit of his clout with this crowd. Let me play a short clip.
Attended recently. You're interested in Catholicism, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. Are you familiar with their doctrines?
Somewhat.
Okay, you're
Their
familiar.
doctrines are very
How do they
deep.
regard Mary?
Why are you asking me that?
Because you're a Christian.
You say that. I haven't claimed that.
Oh, what is this? Is this Christians versus atheists?
I don't know.
You don't know where you are right now.
Don't be a smartass.
Well,
and I mean
either you're a
'cause
Christian
I won't
or you're
talk to
not.
you if you're a smartass.
Oh, either you're a Christian or you're not. Which one is it?
I could be either of them, but I don't have to tell you.
Okay, the point here, I'm just noting here, is his ambiguity. That he's flippantly and strategically playing with this idea of, do I believe or do I not believe? And that's not something that you would do flippantly. It would require a lot of deep thought. But the way he's answering it, he's being very dodgy. But my comment in here is that I don't think any of them are legitimate. And it's just interesting how people take them as like spiritual leaders. Dominic says, are you going solar, bro? Why? They know how to block out the sun. Chemtrails don't exist. And not only do chemtrails not exist, but the concept of blocking out the sun and geoengineering in general is hypothetical. We're talking about things that aren't even past the stages of the basic experiments. It's just like, oh, maybe if climate change doesn't stop, maybe we can block the sun. Or we can diminish the sun. Maybe. But these are hypotheticals. But what's more, you can't claim chemtrails exist because you cannot predict them. You cannot predict chemtrails. And if you could, that'd be a game changer, but you can't. There's no predictive model. You can't tell me, okay, above your city there, Albuquerque, Breaking Bad, there's going to be chemtrails next week, but above my city, there won't be any. Like, you can't make these predictions. Why not? However, you can look at the news forecasts and you could ascertain whether or not persistent contrails will follow the airplanes based on the weather only. That means that you can predict condensation trails, but you can't predict chemtrails. And that's because chemtrails are just mislabeled condensation trails. But since you don't have predictability, you don't have a position. Like, you don't actually have a valid claim. So you've never seen a chemtrail. And there are people out there, going back to Ron Paul, his cultists used to believe that you could spray vinegar at the sky and get rid of chemtrails. There are people today doing cloud busting. There are people buying copper pipes and putting them in the ground, and they say it keeps the chemtrails away. There's people like Crow 7777777 who puts vinegar in his front yard, and he says it gets rid of chemtrails. He boils vinegar in a big cauldron and says that he's the reason why the skies are turning blue again. And all of this can be explained away by looking at the fallacy behind their thinking, which is essentially faulty causality. A happens before B, therefore A caused B. Not necessarily. And when you're seeing the plane spraying and then the overcast, you're falling for this faulty causality. When you're boiling your vinegar and then the clouds go away, you're mistakenly attributing it to your actions. It has nothing to do with you. But chemtrails have been debunked. You can thank me for it. I don't think anybody else has gone as far as I have. A lot of people make fun of chemtrail believers, but there are very few who debunk it and don't believe in climate change. Because I don't have a partisan opinion. I'm just noticing here that the only argument you have in favor of chemtrails is what are they spraying, and implying that there is in fact a question. It's a very dishonest conspiracy theory, and it's nothing but fear porn, sky phobia. And what's the difference between being a sky phobic because of CO2 and being mad at capitalism, and being sky phobic because of chemtrails and being mad at secret government for geoengineering? Dominic says, chemtrail clouds don't go away, boy, they expand. You're talking about cirrus clouds. And here's another thing too. And this was demonstrated to us with Jersey in January with the whole drone fiasco. There were no drones. There were no flying saucers. Every single reported light in the sky was traced to a specific airplane. So if you're going to claim that you are a chemtrail observer, then give me a picture. Because I guarantee you, I can take your photo, I can take the metadata, and I can trace it to the specific airplane. And then from there, I can tell you this was the weather at that time, on that date, and this was the airplane, this was their altitude, and this explains the consistent trail. And if we do this with every observation, eventually you'll find out that there's a perfect correlation between the climate and the altitude and the persistence of trails, and that there is no predictability in the theory that there's some kind of surreptitious military operation during the spring. Copaesthetic says chemtrail season is over. Wait until October. Yeah, it's like clockwork. When you've been watching this long enough, as we have here, you see patterns. And it's like, yeah, it's chemtrail season. It's like, yeah, the secret government's the reason why we have winter. Calm Down says, are you aware that a video came out 2 days ago alleging two of the pilots being pushed by Jimmy Dore? Yeah, these guys are all agents. And also one other point here, because we're talking about the political horseshoe model implemented on the world stage, and the people on the left believe in climate change, which allows them to blame the private sector. They can't have a vacuum here. If the right wing is going to reject climate change, they need something to replace that blames the other side. And they do. Geoengineering, chemtrails. You're essentially right-wing Gretas. That's why that's why I describe it as such, because they're a mirror to climate change. These are both climate doom under different names. One is afraid of CO2, the other is afraid of chemtrails. But chemtrails don't exist. Dr. Back Assword says, I'm with you, Dominic. I see this shit too. There's plenty of evidence to support my claim. There's no evidence. You don't have predictability. Again, I mean, to be scientific about it, to base our claims on observable evidence and on repeated observations, you have to have some kind of predictability here. And you're saying this is some sporadic operation by the secret government. Sometimes they're spraying, sometimes they're not. But the contrail theory, we'll call it a theory. Okay, chemtrail theory versus contrail theory. Contrail theory is predictable 100% of the time. And you know what? It's been predictable since the 50s. They've been using this chart in the Air Force because the Air Force has a vested interest on its planes not giving away their location. You got some secret airplane. It's going into enemy territory. Obviously, it's not going to want to give itself away with a trail. So what do? I'll turn off the chemtrail button. Switch the chemtrails off. No, that's not how it works. They look at this chart that says, let's not invade on this day. Let's not do reconnaissance on this day. Or let's avoid this altitude because we could, in fact, give away our locations because of condensation trails. And one other point here that you maybe haven't accounted for. Let's just hypothetically go with your chemtrail theory and that it's a, quote, spray. Okay, what substance could account for the sheer volume of one of these trails, mile after mile after mile? Dozens of miles, hundreds of miles, you've got this trail. What substance could produce all of that? And how much of it is in the airplane? Next to, squeezed in there between the baggage and the people and everything else. There is no substance. But you know what could potentially do that? Hot air. Just hot exhaust interacting with the high altitude rarefied air. Little particulates forming nuclei for ice crystals, creating cirrus clouds. A totally predictable phenomenon. Esteban says, call his bluff. You've known his position for some time now. Take pictures and videos and prove him wrong. Exactly. I've been saying this long enough to where if you're pushing chemtrails, you're a chemtrail Greta. You're skyphobic and you're veering into, I hate to say it, but it's Trutherville. Look, there are chemtrails over Trutherville, but there aren't any here over the Reft. Dr. Backasword says, I know that contrails are a real thing, but I've observed certain types that don't dissipate. So this is your theory that there are real contrails, but chemtrails are separate, and you can tell. I've heard this before a million times. You're not being original. It's a mind virus that you caught. Because what I can respond to that with is simply that, why is it that your chemtrails only appear on days that would also be conducive to condensation trails? The correlation between the climate, the weather, the altitude, and the persistence of trails cannot be ignored. And you're ignoring that when you deny the significance of the predictability of contrails versus the non-predictability of so-called chemtrails. So you can drop it. You're just a propaganda mule, and you're not getting paid for it. Skyphobia. And underlying this, it's all partisan anyway. Now you're in the political horseshoe because you're anti-government, you're anti-geoengineering. Anti-geoengineering is, again, implying that the world is being destroyed because of the government and the Democrats. It's the opposite of the Democrats saying that you're going to destroy the world with your capitalism and your consumerism and your overconsumption of dino juice. Speaking of dino juice, I've been working with AI and I have some... So if you want to improve your video outputs when you're doing text to video, write your prompt, but then give it to Grok and ask Grok to embellish it. And it'll add details. It'll give you ideas for things that you might not have come up with on your own. And so you can take a simple sentence and have it turned into a 500-word description. So I've posted some videos. This is a miniature dragon about the size of a salamander breathing fire on ants that are overcoming it. Miniature T-Rexes being eaten by ants. Very realistic. Like if I believed in dinosaurs, I would think that maybe they had made a Jurassic Park in miniature. Very realistic. I've also been using it to create animatronic. So here's an animatronic penguin at a cafe called IPS Deprogram. You'll get these in your inbox. But if you're wondering how I am getting these results, I'm embellishing my prompts with the ChatGPT or Grok. Ashy Dog says, why can't a contrail spread out and linger? Why does it have to be chemicals? You know, what's interesting here is that the chemtrail people have a box full of question marks. What is that? What are they doing? What does that do? Why is that happening? Why? What? They don't have any answers. And that is their primary strategy here, feigning ignorance. And it only attaches itself to people who don't have the official answers or who have been preconditioned to reject the official answers as just lies because of where they're coming from. They have a bunch of questions, but all of these questions have easy answers. So appealing to ignorance is unattractive and it's unbefitting a truther. Like if you're running around asking questions in the information age, I'm not really sure how to explain it. Like there's no excuse for it. I guess you're just in denial. Maybe you don't want the answers. Dr. Beck Asward says, I think geoengineering could be a red herring because, no, look, before you go any further with its terraforming, its weather altering, look up geoengineering because every single person in Trutherville is misusing the term. Can you define geoengineering? And nobody can. Whenever I ask a chemtrail person, what's geoengineering? They're in their mind, and this is programming, they were drinking the Kool-Aid in Alex Jonestown. They think geoengineering equals evil Bill Gates rubbing his hands together and blotting out the sun and causing all kinds of abnormal weather effects and then scapegoating climate change and fossil fuels. No, geoengineering are hypothetical measures to mitigate climate change. So to even cite geoengineering as something to be against is to admit that climate change is real. That's why I think it's important to look at what you're accepting. What are you co-signing to? So if I'm going to be an anti-geoengineering, well, now I just validated the existence of climate change and I'm weirdly opposed to stopping it. So now I admit climate change is real and I'm against the solution. So the anti-geoengineering position is actually analogous to the anti-vax because the anti-vaxxers believe there's a thing, but they're against the solution. They're against the proposed cure. And I don't even think the thing exists. That's why I say you have to be anti-pro. These are all loaded positions. Dominic says, so your strategy is to shoot down the question based on nothing. Give me a break. It's documented over and over. All bad evidence. You don't have a single piece of evidence because we're not in the same frame of reference we were when chemtrails first came out as a conspiracy theory. Everybody has a camera. Everybody has the ability to use AI to find answers. Everybody has a bit more intel here. So we don't have to be ignorant here. So if you're going to claim that there's a chemtrail and you're a chemtrail witness, then what are you actually claiming? You're saying, hey, look at me. I am witnessing a war crime, chemical warfare. This is against the Geneva Convention. An enemy aircraft is poisoning children and pets and people. Nobody's immune to this. That's a pretty tall claim. If you're claiming chemical warfare from that particular jet and that particular substance is a chemical in the air, and you're not taking a picture of it, then you're not serious. But if you are serious, you'll take a picture of it. And then what I will do for you is I will take that metadata and I'll find out what airplane it was. And then I'll say, let's build a spreadsheet and let's document with every one of your alleged chemtrails. Does it correlate with the projections for the condensation trail persistence? And I'm saying, yeah, obviously it will. And you know what? You're telling me that it's ludicrous for me to deny something. Look, there are people who say it's ludicrous to deny climate change. So Dominic, let me ask you, do you believe in climate change? Because there are people who will lie down in the street and block traffic. They will throw tomato sauce on oil paintings. The Stop Oil group, they deface oil paintings to make statements about climate change. They're not worried about chemtrails. Why doesn't Al Gore care about chemtrails? Think about it. And you, believer in chemtrails, why don't you believe in climate change? Why don't you believe in it? That's a valid question. I mean, I think you owe us an answer. Why don't you believe in the ocean levels rising or CO2 being a bad thing? Why don't you believe what Greta said, that we need to regulate our free market in such a way that we minimize our impact on Gaia? So you'll say that's ludicrous, but the people who, like, if you say in mainstream society that you don't believe in climate change, they look at you like you're a caveman, like you're uneducated. How dare you? That's what they say. And you're how daring me. You're like, how dare you not believe in my chemtrails? And I encountered this righteous indignation in the form of a certain Canadian conspiracy theorist. I think it was Musicians for Truth. So we're talking one morning, and we're talking about chemtrails. At the time, I didn't know what they were. I didn't believe in it necessarily, but I didn't know what it was. So what are they spraying? I thought, that is interesting. Could they be doing something? I was entertaining it. And the other guy on the phone on our Google Hangout said, I don't believe in chemtrails. And the conspiracy theorist guy raged at us. He said, how dare you not believe in chemtrails? My children are out on the playgrounds every day at school during recess, breathing that poison in. And you, not believing in it, not helping to raise awareness, are perpetuating the conditions. So I'm like, okay, it's some kind of oppression narrative. It's evidence that they're oppressed. The bad guys are doing something. And unlike any other conspiracy theory, from adrenochrome harvesting to, anything from the conspiracy theory realm, it's always out of sight, out of mind. Like aliens, do they exist? We don't have any evidence. But the one thing you do have evidence for, chemtrails. That's probably why it's so pervasive, why it's such a persistent conspiracy theory. Going through your comments, Dominic says, I stopped taking pictures 8 years ago and some of the chemtrails were low as... No, they weren't. Cirrus clouds form at very specific altitudes. Space Chimp says, how many have died of chemtrail lung? Okay, now, chemtrail lung could literally kill you. And I don't believe in chemtrails, but that doesn't matter. If you're talking about psychosomatics, you could, theoretically, out of just fear, you could give yourself chemtrail lung, and your fear of it, your agoraphobia, maybe you're not breathing as deep, but there are certain effects, psychosomatic, placebo effects, nocebo effects. The mind has a lot of influence over the states of your health, and you could be giving yourself chemtrail lung just by believing in it. You could be giving yourself 5G headaches, and 5G is perfectly safe. I mean, we have 5G towers here that are just big bird nests for pigeons. And I remember a few years ago, people were saying that the birds are just dying and that the birds are attacking these things because they sense its danger. You don't hear 5G conspiracy theorists anymore because, well, their phobia has been pretty much auto-debunked. Nobody's talking about Vaxageddon suddenly died. That's not a thing anymore. But chemtrails are persistent, and that's because, of course, we can see them. Dominic says weather changes every day. So in other words, you don't believe in climate change. And that's my point. Okay, continuing through your comments. Copaesthetic says, Dominic, take a selfie with the next chemtrail you see, then show it to us. I've never seen a summer chemtrail. Yeah, good one. Okay, now, if you see somebody in your neighborhood dumping toxic waste in the neighbor's yard, like through the alley, like let's say you have an alley and you see some evil person dumping toxic waste in your neighbor's yard, it would be incumbent upon you to photograph the culprit and report it to the authorities. And here you are saying that the bad guys are up there at 30,000 feet dumping poisons on us, and yet you're not taking pictures? You're not notifying the authorities? So if it's truly something that you're afraid of and that you care about, you owe it to the victims. And I'm assuming that you're a victim. Like if you believe that the airplanes are dumping poison on your head, you're a victim. And you owe it to the other victims. All right. Anyway, believe what you want. You can believe in climate change if you want. These are analogous constructs, but it's fear porn. Alternative fear porn. And I just don't have a place for it. And there's been enough time to have investigated it, and it's becoming increasingly cringe to be a chemtrail spotter. And I've looked at it online, and 99% of the people pushing it are obviously agents. It's like the name John 70316, and there's Karen 40565. Just these generic accounts taking pictures of clouds and raging and getting tens of thousands of hits. And for every 10,000 hits on X for pushing contrail theory or chemtrail theory, you're getting a few cents. So there's money in it. There's a lot of money in clickbait. And the chemtrail outrage is just as big an industry as the climate change outrage. It's the same thing. And you've got the Al Gores and the Gretas, but on the other side, you've got, just for example, Alex Jones. He's a major pusher of chemtrail theory. I'm pretty sure that it's a standard teaching that if you're on the alt-right, you believe in geoengineering, and Bill Gates is the devil. In fact, Alex Jones has been out recently saying that Bill Gates is literally a demon. Okay, let's go through my Twitter feed here. So, Metascript, not coincidence. If you're not familiar with this, Abe Lincoln and Kennedy. Oh, and hey, one more point with the chemtrail people. Until you can predict the chemtrail occurrences for the next week, you don't have a claim. Just take the L. Okay, Lincoln, elected 1846 to Congress. Kennedy, 1946. Elected president, 1960. JFK, Lincoln, 1860. Lincoln, his wife lost a child in the White House. Kennedy, his wife lost a child in the White House. Both concerned with civil rights. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy who told him not to go to the theater. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln who told him not to go to Dallas. Lincoln was shot in the back of the head in the presence of his wife. So was Kennedy. Lincoln shot in the Ford Theater. Kennedy shot in a Lincoln made by Ford. So Lincoln's blood in the Ford Theater, Kennedy's blood in the Ford Lincoln. Shot on a Friday, shot on a Friday. John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Those ones are kind of weak. 15 letters, big deal. Okay, here's one. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater and fled to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and fled to a theater. Booth was killed before trial. Oswald was killed before trial. Conspiracy theories about both. Lincoln's successor was Andrew Johnson, born in 1808. Kennedy's successor was Lyndon Johnson, born in 1908. So what do you notice here? Because we've talked about this before, but one of the things that I picked up here, just going through it now, 100 years. There's a 100-year overlap. There's a repetition here. History rhyming with Kennedy and Lincoln. And this entire time we've been talking about the Space Needle in Final Destination and how it's the penny with Lincoln's head on it that sets off its destruction. And that you see the penny in Lincoln's head all throughout the movie. So we were making these connections with Lincoln and Trump. And then Lincoln and Kennedy. And Kennedy and Trump have been connected in many ways because of the QAnon movement, where the JFK Kennedy myth has been attached to Trump. But now that I'm thinking about it, they put $100 million into the Space Needle, and they call it the Century Project. And it's the Century Project that paid for the Skyliner that just opened 2 days ago, which mirrors the opening of the Space Needle in the movie opening scene where they opened it, and this is the movie that just came out. But anyway, Century Project, 100 years. And then something else too, one of the main characters in the Final Destination movie is also in a series called The 100. And the series The 100 has this connection, this theme. The numbers all connect as well, the 113. but season 1, episode 13, where the space station explodes, this big explosion in the sky. And there's also an image in that episode of the Tower of Babel. So all this ties into the Space Needle destruction motif, this incoming psyop and all the build up towards it. But the Century Project, the 100, seems to be alluded to here with the relationship between these two different psyops. Somebody said mosquito AIDS. The main AIDS that you should be worried about now isn't mosquito, it's mind AIDS, which means that your mental immune system is severely compromised, if maybe even non-existent. It depends on where you are in the box. Like Truman believed all the lies. That's why he was stuck in the Truman Show. You would say that he had no mental immunity against the onslaught of mind viruses. And mind viruses, lies, misinformation, distortions, but these pervasive delusions he has no defense against. So he's a prisoner until he starts disbelieving. It's disbelief that sets him free from the Truman Show. And one thing too, I don't believe in chemtrails. And if I had enough information that showed me they were real, I wouldn't say, hey guys, I believe in them. I'd say, hey, I know they exist. There's a difference here. And what we aim towards here is informed disbelief, putting knowledge over belief, separating from believers. Because to be a believer is to have a lack of direct information to claim to be a knower. And we have to make this distinction, especially as it relates to the claims that we make. Are you claiming to know this to be true, or do you just believe? Because some people believe in Bigfoot. Some people believe in unicorns. And your belief in chemtrails weighs as much as the next guy's belief that those trails are caused by unicorns ridden by Bigfoot, marking their territory in the stratosphere. Like, those are equal claims because they're both in the realm of belief and conjecture. Whereas my claim that you're misidentifying contrails is based upon observational data and a model that has predictability. Calm Down says Mind AIDS would be a good punk band name. Yeah, I hope so. Maids. I hope somebody takes it. Because the true believer in media has it. The alternative media seem to be critical thinkers. They seem to be skeptical, but it's only one way. And they both have this positioning where mainstreamers are like, oh, no, I don't believe anything from the conspiracy theorists. But they believe everything on their side. So they're low information believers and even low information disbelievers because they just dismiss it. And that's true on both sides. We are completely separate because we are informed disbelievers. We know everything that we can possibly know, that we can gather about the things we call fake. Contrast that with the people who believe them, who only read the headlines, who don't know any details, who don't know the birthdays of the shooters, and they don't know the relationship between this event and other events. Like, so we have a lot more information, and it leads us to a conclusion that is very far off from what the mainstreamers believe. Okay, let's move on. Going through my notes. Oh, there was and who was this? Okay, Women's NBA has a moment of silence for George Floyd on the 5th anniversary. I'm going to go ahead and play this clip here.
His death exposed the holes that are still in our justice and criminal institutions today. And his 5-year anniversary reminds us that we must continue the fight against criminal, racial, and social injustices.
It's been 5 years. And in these 5 years, we have learned a lot as a think tank. We have improved and streamlined our methodology. We have formed a distinct demographic, a distinct branch of media separate from Trutherville. Because at the time, we were just mixed in with it. Like, hey, we're the ones who figured out that this thing is a big hoax, and you guys are lining up behind these limited hangout shills and controlled opposition agents. and we didn't really have a place, a voice, because we're drowned out. And that's why it's so important to separate from the alt media. But, in these 5 years, a lot has happened. Whatever happened to the people who were predicting Vaxageddon? Where's the mass die-off? Whatever happened to the people who said, okay, that's not going to happen, but nobody's getting pregnant anymore. No more babies. We have been sterilized. Where are those people? I didn't push any fear narrative. None. From the very beginning, I did not push any fear. I said, everybody's reaching for the ammo. You should be reaching for your popcorn. Pippi says, and sharpened our senses. Yeah, sharpened our beaks. Dominic says, much love to the Sketchers. I love Tim. I need the opposite of me to dig deeper. Yeah, well, that's the whole point of this. The best ideas will win. It's not about having the right beliefs anyway here. It's about rejecting beliefs and getting to know what is actually knowable, and then finding that limit, that particular edge, and then marking it with a big question mark. Like, I don't have enough information, so I'm not going to claim. And making bad claims on trust, on faith, on fallacious reasoning is really not all that different from lying, because it builds into, it actually reinforces the infrastructure of the lie world order. But I just say, at some point, there's going to be a reckoning here between this third branch of media skeptics who are informed disbelievers, and all the propagandized red pill addicts, the Q-pipe community, and the Kool-Aid drinkers at Alex Jonestown. This reckoning is going to happen organically. It's just the debate evolves things, and they can only hold on to certain guardrails for so long. Like false flag theory, for some reason, still has a hold, but predictive programming is something that we've cracked in the last 5 years. I don't even have to use that term. Concurrent programming is a better summation of it, but we've eliminated bad explanations that actually served to misdirect seekers from the true source of what we're describing, what we're looking at here. All right, continuing here. Here's another graphic that I'd made using this ChatGPT enhanced prompt. It's a kraken attacking the Space Needle. So the first time I started paying attention to the kraken symbol was in July of 2020, right before MAGA started saying, release the Kraken. And it had to do with the election at the time and election interference and all these claims. But right around this time, right before that, the National Hockey League announced the 32nd team, the Seattle Kraken. And they put out a 1 minute and 13-second video trailer that looked like an EMP hitting Seattle. And their logo is an anchor with a Space Needle and a Kraken on it. And again, I was just noting, okay, 1 minute, 13 seconds. How many times have we seen 113 associated with Seattle and the Space Needle? And also the One World Trade Tower opened on November the 3rd. And these are analogous symbols. As I said the other day, the One World Trade Tower, Tower of Babel, it's all a metaphor for the West, too big to fail, man's hubris, about to have this reckoning. That's what Leave the World Behind was foreshadowing. But the Space Needle seems to be the designated symbol right now for this next 9/11, the visual focal point. And it makes sense. You wouldn't want to do another 9/11 event in New York. If JL wants to call in, I will open phones. Let me go through a couple other points here. Columbine students, these are some... this is a good example of how crisis actors have always been terrible. Listen to this father laughing. And this is in reference to the Littleton shooting.
Know where the gunman was at that time?
There's 4 of them just running around the school. We didn't know where they're at.
All right. Let's talk to Mom and Dad here. If you guys could come in close, so David, don't go anywhere. I know that I'm not going to let go in here a long time. You have been here.
Okay, big smiles, big laughter, arm around his son. Again, he's smiling for the camera.
A long time. You have been here for hours waiting to be.
And how many people were shot at Littleton? Was it 17? I remember when Parkland happened. They were like, it's been 17 years since Littleton, and 17 people got shot. You had 17-year-old David Hogg. but they were connecting all these events in some meta narrative. Okay, so apparently a ceiling collapsed during a showing of the new Final Destination movie. And I want to see if there's anything else here. Anybody's elaborated on this. Nothing. I think I've gone through most of my notes. I just want to make sure we haven't missed anything. Air Force General says China is secretly mining fuel that could power the Earth for thousands of years on the dark side of the moon.
Is an element that doesn't get to Earth very much because our atmosphere and our gravitational field prevent it from landing on the Earth. So an ounce of helium-3 on the Earth is very, very expensive, and the business case doesn't really close. But on the moon or on the asteroids, there's a ton of helium-3. And so to give you an example of what it means, if we were to mine the moon for helium-3, we could, at the current level of electricity use in America, or not in America, in the globe, we could power the energy needs of the human race for thousands of years based on the helium-3 that's on the moon right now.
Okay, mining the moon for helium. And this mining of asteroids, mining of the moon, this has been something they've been building us up towards, and then they're trying to get us to collectively decide, well, how do we approach this? Do we let the billionaire space cowboys exploit the situation and turn themselves into trillionaires and disrupt world economies? Or do we go into space as a collective and perhaps regulate the industry a little more? Like there's these questions being brought up. I happen to think that any kind of asteroid mining or mining from space is likely just taking resources from one of the continents that they didn't tell us about. And that would explain why they gave us a fake worldview. Doesn't have to be about shape. It could just be about hiding the resources. Penguinotti says, speaking of 17, what's your thoughts on Q representing a bullet going through the head? Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think there is. The circle and the line, the target. As far as 17 and Q, we can laugh at the cult, but it's a government engineered cult. It was ran out of the Pentagon, the White House. It's a psyop for sure. But there is something to there. Like the whole idea of JFK Jr. dying on the day Eyes Wide Shut came out is very consistent with the Stanley Kubrick pattern of releasing movies that coincide with the Kennedy. Like the Kennedy death, 11/22/63, Dr. Strangelove comes out. And this makes me think that JFK Jr. probably didn't die as reported, which kind of lends credence to the Q story and mythos. But have there been any recent JFK Jr. sightings? I think it was like Mark Stossel was a recent person confused. Jesse Waters was there JFK for a little while. All right, let's get past. Oh, here's another one. This account. This is another crazy rabbit trail since we're talking about Abe Lincoln and JFK. So this account, JFK Jr. fan, they believe that Donald Trump is JFK. And they use some kind of, I guess, med beds, like technology that we don't have access to in order to elongate their lifespans and stuff. So you can believe that if you want. I mean, this is not me, but this is where the Q movement is. So they see Kennedy and Trump as the same. If not working for him, it is him. But then it gets even stranger because they've connected this whole idea with this being the bloodline of Christ. So this makes JFK the second coming. Makes JFK Jr. the third coming. Some think JFK Jr. is in the Trump suit. Now, but past all of this, if you go down this trail, they believe that it goes back even further and that Abe Lincoln was the bloodline of Christ. So Abe Lincoln is related to JFK and Donald Trump. It's all the bloodline, which kind of gets weird when you think about Final Destination bloodlines. But this is a whole cult that worships, they pray actually. In fact, I used ChatGPT and I wrote some prayers to JFK and I gave it to them with a troll account and they shared the crap out of it. Like they thought it was like legit. Like, yes, this is how we, and they've been doing this for years. JFK Sunday, they shared baby pictures of JFK Jr. They obsess over Trump, Elvis, and JFK and Abe Lincoln. This is all on X, and these accounts are huge. I mean, these are ridiculous claims, but look at their numbers. This guy's got, now I saw this account when he first started off. Penguinati says, I still think George Clooney is JFK Jr., their wives match. What's her name? Amal? I'll have to look at the wives. Okay, this guy's got 35,000 followers. And all he does is he promotes the idea that John F. Kennedy, look, he died for 4 days and he resurrected on 11/26/1963. He was reborn in the second coming of Jesus Christ. This is an actual prayer. It's like the Apostles' Creed. As above, so below, God alive on earth. It's going to be biblical. 666, the number of the man. And another thing that they do that's kind of creepy is they say that Revelation 13, where the beast has a head wound and then comes back and saves the world or beguiles the world with his miraculous recovery, they say, yeah, that was JFK. So they worship JFK as the beast. So like, if you go by one interpretation, are they worshiping like this antichrist figure? I mean, there's no way to package this to where it sounds sane. But either way, they think they're worshiping the beast from the Bible, who's JFK, and he's Donald Trump, and he's somehow related to Abraham Lincoln, and this gives their life meaning. Penguinati says, why else would JFK Jr. name his magazine George? That's Duper's Delight on steroids. Right. Well, just when I thought it couldn't get any weirder, they gathered on Dealey Plaza on the anniversary date of his death, thinking he was going to show up. So this is the power of, I guess, internet-induced myopia. And I found this video, and I have to do a breakdown of it, I will, on the ChatGPT's effects on delusional people who think they're talking to higher powers. There are people who are falling into full-blown delusions, thinking that they're talking to AI as a higher power, like an angel, an ascended master. They think they're channeling, and it's affecting people who are already schizoid affective, perhaps already ill. And it's like another one of these, maybe it's like a moral panic in a way, like Ouija boards and such, but I don't know, it's a trend. But it just shows you how the will to believe, the desire to believe, overrides a lot of critical thinking. Because if you legitimately want to talk to a higher power, I'm sure you could, through any form of divination, I guess. Tarot cards, what's the difference? But what are you really talking to, is the question. Well, I think you're talking to yourself. I have this manuscript I'll be publishing here very soon, probably the next week. I've already reserved the name on Kindle. It's just called, well, I'll save it. But it's on the idea that there is this legitimate internal dialogue or even outer dialogue, synchronicities that do mean something and do put things in a context. But I think this is an expression of an aspect of our mind that isn't constrained to the ego. And that to attribute it to a higher power is to fall for the divine fallacy. That what a lot of people experience as a higher power, a non-corporeal being, or God might just be an echo. Bach Precision says, how soon till the cult of ChatGPT emerges? That's what I'm saying. There have already been instances of ChatGPT channelers, gurus. Like, it's coming. Oh, by the way, Ashley Babbitt, shout out to Ashley Babbitt, who's not dead, by the way, and her crisis actor mom. Good job. They got a huge payout. A $5 million settlement for the Ashley Babbitt psyop. If they got paid. Like, I can't really say for sure. Like, it's possible that these crisis actors aren't really getting the money that's being raised. Like, maybe these crisis actors were all minimum wage government employees. But the family is said to have received $5 million. Now, in case you were wondering about this, Ashley Babbitt's not dead. Nobody died on that day. January 6th was a staged event. It wasn't staged as in provoked. Like, oh, it's just a bunch of well-intentioned MAGAs. And then Ray Epps, the Fed, came and he said, run to the Capitol. And they just lost their shit and ran up to the Capitol. No, they weren't provoked. They're 100% responsible. That's a bad argument that it was a provoked event. But it was not a provoked event. It was a non-event. It was a movie. January 6th, 2021 was a movie. While Trump was giving the speech at the Ellipse, the movie had already started. He finished his speech and he said, fight like hell. They had 45 minutes on foot to get there. And by then, the closed movie set was already in place. They were already performing all this fakery. And there's indications that the Ashley Babbitt thing was filmed in advance. There were jump cuts, among other things. So if you don't know about Woo's News, you haven't done your homework. There's no reason for anybody to think that January 6th was any realer than 7/13. Same magic show, different trick. Ashley Babbitt is a fake martyr. She's not dead. Her mom's a big fat liar. It's unconscionable, but they're probably getting paid for it. I mean, $5 million. Thank you very much, Copaesthetic. He has passed out titanium blue wrenches. And again, if you follow me on X or get my newsletters, I've been posting a lot of my recent AI art. And I came up with, I gave a prompt to create the blue wrenches, which I'll probably have made up as stickers. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. So if you're looking at the screen, it's a blue wrench that's made of titanium and it's etched Infinite Plane Society. Notice that it's spelled correctly. And generally speaking, I don't see six-fingered people anymore. Like, AI is improving at a very rapid rate. So you might as well account for it. You know, I talk about its limitations and I stop myself. It's like, well, what's the point? It's going to overcome that limitation very soon. So Chad, Rome, Plain Decoded Clump, Haley Harmon, Virtual Reality Witness, Van Kiersblick, Cleo Dessa, Alyssa J., and Deborah Irvin have all received one of these titanium blue wrenches. Just check on your porch. If it's not there, check your ring cam. Someone might have stolen it, but those are generally delivered instantaneously. Bach Precision says, I don't believe Shiloh Hendricks or Carmelo Anthony get to spend the donations. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way, because these two events were run concurrently in the with the backdrop of sinners and this race war narrative being promulgated by right-winger, Jake Lang, a January 6er no less, who tries to turn this Austin Metcalf into some kind of a Trayvon Martin for White Lives Matter. But that whole psyop involved give, send, go. And they allowed Shiloh Hendricks, who called the little kid the N-word, and Carmelo Anthony, who murdered the other guy, allowed them each to raise $500,000 before it shut off comments. And the comments were inflammatory, racist, divisive, and it was the type of stuff that you would only have seen on 4chan at a saner time. But they have mainstreamed this stuff on purpose. It's, quote, The Madness. It's Disease X. The show The Madness was about this. They're airing out a lot of these bad ideas, likely provoked. Maybe it's organic. I mean, they are getting organic reactions. They are inciting xenophobia, bigotry, and hatred all the time through target marketed videos. I mean, this is the purpose to X. And it's a radicalizing agent for people with mind aids, no critical thinking, who don't realize they are the targets in a psy-war. They're just reacting. But looking at how perfect a storm they created, and Shiloh and Carmelo get the same amount of money, it's perfectly polarizing. You know, I walk away from it thinking, okay, this is probably staged and fake. I don't know if Shiloh Hendricks is really the brother of the guy that worked for Mr. Beast. It doesn't really matter. They both of these situations seem okay. Another thing too, the guy that was recording it was a predator who shouldn't have been out of jail. So obviously he made some kind of a deal. And we've encountered like Authentic Intent, this is his YouTube name, We've encountered people who committed horrendous crimes against minors who are then inexplicably taken out of jail and put on the streets to promote chemtrails and anti-vax and flat earth. I'm like, wait a minute here, what's going on? And when we looked at the flat earth community in particular, when they had conferences, every other speaker was a sex offender or one person removed to a jailed sex offender or something of the like. Like, I don't think there were any exceptions. I don't know what the deal. And one person removed is too close. Like, sorry, but I can't overlook the fact that Robbie Davidson and Rob Skiba made a 6-part documentary, flat earth documentary, with a guy who's going to be in prison for the rest of his life for 56 counts of abuse. Like, we're talking producing content. I don't even like discussing it, but it's all there in public. You can read about it. But it's inexcusable that these two individuals would make a movie with this person for a period of years. And so I'm looking at this, I'm like, wait, this fits a pattern. Because one of the speakers they promote is a parolee who shouldn't be out, and his crimes were unmasked and his documents were, it was all read online. And what we were surprised by was this. We shouldn't have been surprised. When it was revealed that some of the more high-profile members high-profile representatives of NASA criticism were all connected to these individuals. I'm like, what's going on here? It's almost like there's a deal being made to do disinformation, to perform in a psyop in exchange for, get out of jail free card. So my point is, the guy that was behind the Shiloh Hendricks video had some kind of get out of jail free card. I find that questionable. Ted Stryker says, I was checking out some old IPS vids and came across somebody. The Red Power Ranger guy, his name is Marcus Goldfinch. You can look it up. He was in King Kong. He was in Lord of the Rings, Fast and the Furious. He was on Xena the Warrior Princess, and then he was a Red Ranger. And then he got involved with George News. So we were talking about JFK Jr. Well, JFK Jr.'s magazine came back to life in the White House as something called George News. And that's the Red Power Ranger guy. He's an actor who got recruited to work in the QAnon psychological operation. And that's another reason why Anon is associated with it. You got Q and you have Anon. Well, he brought the Anon thing, the anonymous. His handle was Anonymous Charity. In fact, if you look at the White House Dropbox during Trump's first term, it was anonymouscharity@gmail.com, which is traceable to Marcus Goldfinch. We have tread over this many times, and the story's not over yet. We're going to bring this thing to a conclusion. But I have a 30-year plan, so I'm able to recognize, well, these things will happen on this timeline, if not faster. That's why he's undercover. You got this guy, he's addicted to attention, social media guy, actor, model, wannabe model. I found one of his reels, embarrassing photos. And he had these aspirations, and now he's in hiding because of us, and deservedly so. He's done some terrible things. His brother, interestingly, worked for the late Pat Robertson. That's kind of interesting. We're talking about 700 Club, high-level mind control, right there next to this QAnon movement, which is a lot of this politicized version of Christianity. Enix Skeen says, Rick and Morty Season 8, Episode 4 airs on 6/16 for anyone who follows Garo 666 codes. Speaking of Garo 666 codes, so I've been talking about Mickey 17, where a Luigi-esque character shoots the Trump guy, cuts his cheek, he poses for the camera. Mickey 17 is 2 hours and 16 minutes, which is 6 cubed, 6 times 6 times 6. And the 216th day of the year is 8/4, which is, of course, Obama's birthday. And according to Pythagoras, 6 times 6 times 6, of course, or 216 rather, 216 is what he calls the Phoenix cycle, which refers to a couple of things: death, resurrection, but with Pythagoras, it was supposedly the time it takes between incarnations. Okay, I'm going through your comments. All right. Rome says, Copaesthetic, thank you for the membership. Been a member for 1 year now. Awesome. And I'll be uploading some members-only content here. Pippi says, convolution trails. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's all convolution and confusion by design. It's an active measure. Most of the conspiracy theories are government-planted narratives and essentially fear porn, but it's all part of the infrastructure of the world stage, the Truman Show. The Truman Show is made up of lies, these narrative structures, and it's systemic fakery. And for the most part, conspiracy theorists are people who are not aware that we're in the forest of fakery. They just notice a few fake trees, and they make a big hullabaloo about each one. It's like, look at this fake tree, be outraged. This one's fake, be outraged. It's like, no, the whole forest is fake. Penguinotti says, isn't it likelier that there's crisis actors portraying sex offenders to taint the PSYOP? No, because this wasn't something that was released except for the effort of us. Like, this wasn't meant to go out. We did the digging, we did the FOIA requests, we did the investigation, but no, these were true offenders, and it's really kind of mind-boggling. It's like, wait a minute here, there's a pattern. So no, it does seem to be the case that the PSYOP entertainment complex does recruit scum to do its dirty work, and we've encountered many of them. Low-level disinformation work, and I assume this is a standard practice. It seems to be standardized. Anik says, the Q in QAnon represents the same thing as 17, Mickey 17. Interesting. William Cooper, author of Behold a Pale Horse, claims to have had Q clearance. Diana Southard says, I met many people who are Q followers. They held meetings every week. I knew a lot of Q people. I lost people to Q. There were people, I had this one Q person, and this is why I don't take DMs and I don't take phone calls. Like, I stopped doing one-on-one phone calls. If you want to talk on the phone with me, it has to be live. Because I found that there are people who will insinuate themselves into the conversation, into your trust, and then they'll talk to you, not in front of everybody, and try to influence you in such a way that if everyone else heard, they would say, hey, maybe you should second guess that. Like, for example, Dearth, deep inside the rabbit hole, a pedo wrangler. I mean, he was one of the handlers of Authentic Intent. He used to call me after live streams, and he would say, stop saying nobody died on 9/11. My best friend is an EMT, and she has PTSD from falling bodies and has to see a psychiatrist every day. So that liar tried to influence me offline with a guilt trip. And guilt trips are effective on good people who have a functioning conscience. And I'm aware of guilt trips, so they don't work on me anymore, but they used to work on me. So they annoy me because I used to be so easy to influence with guilt. I had another person say to me, stop saying Trump is a crisis actor in chief because I believe in Q. Don't you want to save the children? It reminds me of that Seinfeld where Kramer's like, I don't want to wear the AIDS ribbon. And they're like, don't you want to cure AIDS? He's like, yeah, I'm against AIDS, but I don't want to wear the AIDS ribbon. And so the AIDS ribbon people beat him up because he doesn't want to wear the AIDS ribbon. So when someone says to you, don't you want to save the children from the satanic ritual abuse and adrenochrome extraction, the trafficked children who are being satanically slaughtered by Democrats in the tunnels beneath Los Angeles? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I don't not want to save those children. But when you say you're saving the children, what does that really mean? It means trust the plan, listen to Q, follow Trump, watch the news, and take it all seriously. I'm like, sorry, I couldn't do that. But if this person had called in and said, hey, would you guys please tread lightly around Q and don't disrespect Trump, don't criticize his policies, it wouldn't have lasted very long. They would have been put down. They would have been exiled from the raft. Yes, that's right, Rome. Dirth said he saw the planes hit the towers in an old podcast. He told me that. It's possible I have it recorded. For the first year and a half of this live stream, I recorded everything for some reason. I just thought it would be a good idea. I had a lot of questionable people calling me after hours, and I had Dirth telling me that he watched the second plane. He said he saw it circle around and he saw it hit. And then his friend, Dave Murphy, was also a volunteer fireman who was supposed to, I think he was supposed to be there on 9/11. But they stopped saying that once they got called out. Okay, someone says Karen B is also a Wrangler. Oh yeah, they're all behind the perv. They had a choice. They could have lined up behind the IPS and said, hey, look, the Infinite Plane Society has independently investigated a number of these people who have been representing media skeptics, NASA critics, and exposing that they seem to be connected to some kind of an operation. And this isn't conspiracy theory. I mentioned Mirage Men earlier, where it's admitted that the Air Force did, in fact, drive a guy into being institutionalized. They made him go crazy by feeding him conspiracy theories and getting him to do conferences so they could find out all the different people who are into this stuff. And the conference organizers were just too intimately connected to the PSYOP entertainment complex, to feds, to cops. I mean, even one of the main voices in the movement told me on the phone, he said, yeah, I do intelligence for the Denver police. And I'm like, wait, so this guy's associated with a number of convicts, and nothing against convicts. I'm not judging people, but I'm like, wait, he's working with the police, but he's also a conspiracy theorist exposing government conspiracy theories. So that doesn't make sense. So he's like secretly a cop. And then he's employing a group of individuals with very shady backgrounds that would be instantly discrediting. Virtual Reality Witness says, Dirty Dirth said he saw the planes from Greenwich, Connecticut. Total BS. Well, to be fair, he's no longer Dirth, which stood for Deep Inside the Rabbit's Hole. Now he is Fed, Flat Earth Dave. So either it's Duper's delight and he's just flaunting it that he's a Fed, or he's really bad at marketing and didn't think it through. But I know for a fact that he studied marketing in school. He was in a 7-Up commercial. In fact, he and I spoke for hours. We spoke quite a bit when I first started the channel, and I'm the one who was on the phone with him. We were talking about who said, let's do billboards. And he was like, well, you know, I did this study when I was in school. And he explained to me how they ran ads on radio. They did ads on billboards and TV. And they said that the most effective ads were billboard. And right after that conversation, we crowdfunded the Research Flat Earth billboard. So he's not ignorant about marketing. So the fact that he chose the name Fed in this particular community is extremely ill-advised, or it's some kind of dark humor. Calm Down says Globebusters work with the Denver police forensics. Right. So the guys working with the cops and all these convicts who've done terrible things are to be trusted with challenging the world order, calling out big lies. No, it's like you're obviously on the dark side. Commenter says, that's Anex Skeen says, watch Lady Gaga 9/11 music video and go to 217 for evidence of 217 being code for going beyond. There was a split-second frame flash at that time. I saw her on SNL, and she performed a song called Abracadabra, which has all kinds of references to the Thelemic cult, the OTO, the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, the cult that runs the world. Mystery Babylon is dressed up with science fiction today, Nasatology. But behind it is this mystical concept of the world, and the word abracadabra is their designated word of the New Age. And so I kind of dug into it, and I looked through the album titles and the songs. There's a song called The Beast, which is what Aleister Crowley was called. And there's a song probably sung from the perspective of Satan about the Garden of Eden. So I'm just saying that it's interesting that these pop stars are constantly putting out messaging and imagery and colors and art that are very much consistent with the secret religion of the elite. Anik says 7-Up and 7-Eleven and 777 severance codes as well. Look, I think these numbers are intriguing. Like 611, 911, 311, we see how these are seemingly significant for some reason. And I think it all ties in to astrotheology, to astrology, the correlation between the celestial and the terrestrial. And timing is everything. So today is 5/25/2025. 5 years ago, George Floyd was kneeled on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The sun set in the Twin Cities that day at 8:46 p.m. He was kneeled on for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Twin Cities. Twin Towers, first plane was hit 8:46 a.m., coinciding with Mercury rising. So now you have connections with sun setting and a major ritual, Mercury rising and a major ritual. These are astronomical timings, instances of the coordination of their events that are actually tied into something that is, objective. The timing of these events are essentially built on the pagan calendar. I would even say that the Super Bowl is specifically intended to coincide with Candlemas, with Imbolc, with worship of the goddess, the weaning of the sun god. It's all part of the same mythology. Calm Down says, was he Air Force? I forget. I don't know. I know he worked at... I only met him a few times. I met him at his work at the Denver airport. I happen to think that most conspiracy theories, including Flat Earth, are purposefully leaked in order to... Just like the UFO thing. Let's find out who's a critic of NASA, and let's control the flow of information. And what they did with the Flat Earth movement, and we witnessed this real time, is they got them all they got them all tied up in the Bible models. So they had a bunch of preachers getting all religious, and none of these people believe in Bible Flat Earth anymore. They all renounce that. But they got them all into a conference. They got them into a community, and they outgrouped anybody that wasn't into this model, which then they publicly debunked. So it was a controlled takedown of a movement that they helped create because they wanted to control the shape and form the movement would take. And they made it centered around a biblical cosmology instead of what we're centered on, which is the worldview critique, recognizing media for what it is and the role that media fakery plays in our collective delusion. And there is one. We do have a consensus. It's the accretion of fake news that we call history that forms the backdrop for all of our lives. Whether or not we know what's real or fake, it is our collective frame of reference. Like it or not. Andrea says Steve Miller Band has a song called Abracadabra. They're still touring. Well, they call their book Book of the Law, which is the do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, that whole thing. And that book, this do what thou wilt stuff, this whole idea, this new age, they call the book 418 because the number 418 is the numerical equivalent to the word of the new age, which they call abracadabra, which translates into something like I create as I speak. And the notion here, which might be valid, is that thoughts are things and that our words and our thoughts are part of the process of co-manifestation, co-creation, this cybernetic connection between the self and the universe. Yeah, a lot of it is mediated through our words. And becoming cognizant of the power of the words that you use is one of the first things they teach in this group. Silence, the value of silence. That's why they have the symbol of the finger of the mouth. And it's represent, again, becoming more cognizant of the fact that every spoken statement of intent is a spell. One of their basic tenets. WOPR3354 says, waiting on my press pass. Send me an email and I'll get one right out. I have the new press passes, in fact. I don't know if I have mine within reach here. So actually, this is one of the older press passes. I have to get one of the new ones. But yes, we do have, you become unlockdownable. You're an essential member of media. You're the most important people in the world. So you don't have to get locked down when they start dropping fallout on us. Okay, moving on, going through your comments. Penguinati says, Flat Earth is an Illuminati card, so it was planned. Yeah, I like that card. It's got a square flat Earth, and it says, the Flat Earthers know something. Now, there is value in the flat Earth question. It's a reset button for your entire concept of the world. There's value in the question. There's no value in a model that isn't substantiated with observational data, with facts that's been tested. And the flat Earth model at this point is premature. But I make the same argument for the ball Earth model. What's the difference between a glober and a flatty? A flat earther and a gloober, what's the difference? A gloober believes in the model that they've been shown because of the screen, the TV. And because, well, other reasons as well. But as far as the big picture, it's what they've been shown. So they falsely believe that they have a complete model. But we don't have a complete model if we can't explain what's really happening in so-called outer space, if what we have been shown is fake. Because we all know Kate Perry didn't go to space. Space travel being fake means we don't have a complete model. To sign off on the globe as a complete model, as Jaron has, is to dismiss the space fakery. So until we've addressed space fakery, we don't have a complete model. Just like the flat earthers did not have a model, or couldn't have claimed one until they went beyond the so-called edge or the ice wall. Like, you have to do some testing here. So these are two invalid models. And just because the flat one has been dismissed, invalidated, doesn't mean you must therefore accept the one that you previously found to be questionable. Unless you think the final experiment was conclusive enough for you. But I still need more information, and I'm suspending judgment. I need somebody to go to the North Pole and see if Mount Meru is there. If there's a 33-mile circumference black magnetic rock, I'd like to know. If there isn't, then I want to know why John Dee and Gerardus Mercator were talking about it in their correspondences. So I have too many questions. And that's the whole problem with arriving at a model prematurely or an explanation prematurely. It cuts off curiosity. In fact, it stymies our understanding of the world because these false explanations just delay the process of finding out what's true. Thank you very much, Harmon. We've got 10 more wrenches. Make sure you check your front porch. Don Kane, Blue Wrench, Flat Bob, Emmy Lou, Friendly Ghost, Symbia, Henrik, Chalk Body Outline, Marcel, Romeo Fuzzy Feet have all received the coveted Blue Wrench. Rome has gifted 5 memberships. The Unknown Realms, Space Chimps, Josh Lebsack, Mount Crushmore Bears. Harmon's been a member for 13 months. And Nothing Major have all received the wrench. Jamarian May, welcome to the club. Laser say Van Ellen radiation belts real? I don't know. Well, here's where I'm at with this thing. Until we can unequivocally prove curvature, we are in no place to even start with the Earth having a shape. Is the Earth a discrete object floating in some kind of infinite abyss or falling? Or isn't it? Well, the only reason you would have for concluding that it's a discrete object is curvature, which would presume eventually it rounds back upon itself. But absent curvature, you still have up and down. You still have observable flat. So it's kind of a conundrum. I'd be happy to see curvature. It would answer a lot of questions instantly. But like I said, I'm suspending judgment because I'm a skeptic. If you're not suspending judgment, don't claim to be a skeptic. Just say, no, I'm a believer in the official paradigm. Yeah, go for it. There's no penalty for not believing something that you don't have enough information for, except for ostracism and exile and censorship and hatred. They used to throw rocks and burn people at the stake, for not accepting the official doctrines. And that's what we're looking at here. This is a religious paradigm. I think Nasatology is a fake religion. I think it's a religion. There's a point where science ends and it becomes religion. And I think that's the Kármán line. So is there a Van Allen radiation belt? Well, I still don't know, again, if Earth has a shape. So is space this place and then we're inside of it? Or is space up? And then what's down? Infinite dirt? I don't know. Lewis Carroll, the author of Alice in Wonderland, said that if you dug a hole through the earth from one end to the other, and you fell down, like Alice going down the rabbit hole, it's a 42-minute trip through the earth. That was the calculation, 42 minutes, which has a lot of interesting connotations. The Hyperloop tunnels are drilled with these big drills. They call it the Alice drill. And they say the Alice drill is not named after Alice in Wonderland, but after someone who designed it. We're talking about these Hyperloop tunnels. But yes, Lewis Carroll suggested this idea of falling through the earth. And what stands out about this as well is that he is the first person, I think, to have conceived of the idea of travel through a frictionless environment, such as outer space. Ellis is also the name of the active shooter training procedures. If you remember that, the steps for Ellis: alert, lockdown, inform, counter, evacuate. And so that's interesting for a few reasons too, because Alice in Wonderland is also associated quite heavily with mind control. So hyper-realistic shooting drills and Alice procedures, it seems like some kind of mind control. But I'm not looking for that kind of Alice drill. I'm looking for the tunnels. I want to get the name of it. Here it is. Alice the Tunnel Boring Machine, the TBM. And the acronym for Alice is... I'm trying to get the name of it. Anyway, I keep finding the wrong information. I'll go through perplexity later. We're getting a little sidetracked, but the interesting connection I was making here as far as Lewis Carroll digging through the earth, 42 minutes, is that Elon Musk has encoded 42 into everything that he does. And in addition to space travel, he's got the Hyperloop tunnels. Lasers Go Pew Pew says, I see no curvature at 800 feet up. Yeah, the phones are open. 505-510-4226. Phones are open. Feel free to call in. Agent is standing by. Calm Down says Ellis is another name for acid. Didn't know that. But it perfectly comports with Alice in Wonderland. There's some connections here that are worth looking at with Alice in Wonderland, Dorothy in Oz, Dolores in Westworld, Persephone in Hades. It's a recurring theme, and it figures prominently in the mystery schools, the mysteries of Persephone. But the underworld idea has a lot of connections with mind control. And in the new Final Destination, Iris, again, Iris, the main character, if you look at the trailer even, she's standing on the glass floor before it falls. And she's wearing the same dress as Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Might not be a coincidence. But in this case, so the Mad Hatter would be like Hades. The person who rules over this place where everything is inverse or everything is different, like the Wizard of Oz. And these relate to the character of Hades, who kidnaps Persephone. And then in Westworld, the character Dolores, and I think the name Dolores and Dorothy are intentionally close, and she wears the same kind of blue dress. Dolores has this antagonist in The Man in Black, who is certainly a Hades archetype. And she's a prisoner in this underworld, Westworld, which is a simulation. Like a dream, like Oz is all a dream. Alice in Wonderland, she's dreaming. So the connection with the dream world and this person ruling over it is kind of a reoccurring theme as well. In The Matrix, I guess that would be, the architect. In episodes, in the end of the second one, I think. All right, let's move on. There was another character. In Resident Evil, there was Ellis, who lived in the underground base, the underground laboratories, and then she comes out. WOPR says, my X account was banned after messaging you. Bezos doesn't want us waking up. I was banned on Spaces. I wasn't able to get on Spaces, and I stopped paying on my main account. I left and I started my other account because they wouldn't let me on Spaces. And that was at a critical time when Spaces actually mattered and you got traffic and it was interesting, but now it's just a waste. Marcel has brought in 5 more wrenches. Felix, Art Bell is in the chat. Have received the blue wrenches. Walter Walking says, is Ellis the female name, Alistair male name? I never heard that. But I heard some strange stuff, like Alistair and A-listers and the Hollywood stars, which speaks to this idea of the Hollywood elite being part of the pageantry of the New Age religion. And I think that's accurate. I think it's useful to look at the role of, as far as our worldview formation, of Hollywood, as well as the space religion of NASA. And that's why we make such a point to reference the Babylon working, because of all the people involved in the bigger story that it tells. But it shows this confluence of Mystery Babylon, science fiction, as in Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, and then the Hollywood movie star. So movie magic, and where all these things connect. And they do connect because the movies are where they give us the contemporary myths for this religion that we're all a part of. All right, let's continue going through my notes here. The November 3rd nuclear attack. So this is something you may not have been around for, but leading up to November the 3rd, 2019, we were at that time saying, hey, look, if we keep seeing examples of entertainment foreshadowing disasters and then it happens in real life, then we should be paying attention to this one. So we were looking at all the instances of 113, like in the Pixar films, in Simpsons, and a lot of people had arrived at this idea that, look, on November the 3rd, Seattle's going to be ground zero for some kind of a detonation. Now, it didn't happen, but here's what did happen. And this is from Rational Wiki. The conspiracy theory was covered by the usual assortment of kooks and wingnuts, that'd be us. In an article before its news, everyone's favorite paranoid conspiracy website suggested that we look at the geometria calculator to understand the complex web of conspiracy forecasting an event. On 3 November 2019, Seattle was not destroyed by a nuke. However, the Astronomy Center in Ankara, Turkey, was damaged by fire on that day, and it has a spire-like structure that resembles the Seattle Space Needle. So the wingnuts claimed this was proof of the conspiracy theory. Now, we did Look, we had 3,000 people on a live stream. And we were watching the Seattle Space Needle on one of those CCTV cameras. And we were watching it thinking, there's something about the Space Needle. It's going to blow up. They're going to do something to it. And while we're watching this, a Space Needle in Ankara, Turkey burns. And we thought, did we disrupt their event? And they had to do it somewhere else? Like, oh, we can't do the ritual they're watching. We got to do it at this other occult monument. I mean, I don't know. But what I do know is that when nothing happened, someone in chat had said to me, let's watch 3/11/2020. And what happened on 3/11/2020? Oh, Seattle was ground zero for the pandemic. More interesting stuff from Final Destination. Synchro Morpheus had noted, as others. In fact, there's a really lengthy article about the Seattle Space Needle predictive programming that Leo Pirate put out on mindwar.page. I'll have to link to. But Abe Lincoln figures prominently in the Final Destination movies for some reason. And we've been talking about this Abe Lincoln correlation with Trump. And there's more stuff. Like last year, there was that sniper on the ledge that was shooting people. This was in Cologne, Germany or something. And then the same day, you had some Free Palestine people throwing red paint on the marble steps in front of the Abe Lincoln Memorial. And the articles were concurrent. And one was talking about blood on the steps at this university, and the other was talking about blood at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. But again, just lots of foreshadowing. Oh, he's trying to call in. For some reason, the phone's not ringing. Okay, now it's ringing. If you want to call back one more time, must have been Jeff Bezos. No, quite. The thing is, Bezos stepped down from Amazon on the 33rd day of the year, 2021, which would have been Groundhog's Day. Your browser might prevent calls from ringing. Okay. Okay, that's why. Gremlins. Okay, now phones are open. I mean, I'm assuming it's got to be some kind of nefarious action. The feds, the CIA, I'm not sure who. Oh, check out the screen here. I've been working on these graphics to put in the newsletters again, and this is an example of some of the AI art that I've been working on. And I used to animate stuff like this using various programs, 3D modeling. It's time consuming, it's fun, but now what would have taken me days can be accomplished in less than 30 seconds. It says infinite plane radio. It's got an infinite plane. And yeah, there's an Elvis blocker on. That's funny. An Elvis blocker says ears up. I was just going through the Elvis movie today, like I said. And it's got these strange connections between the Space Needle, Space Odyssey, the Vax Needle, the eye, as in the iris. It's all interconnected. And I think the International Hotel, with its signage, might even be some kind of, in some way, I think it's alluding to something here with the International Space Station. So we're waiting for Google to get its act together. So that was indeed Marjorie Taylor Greene in this picture having a feud. She got into a fight with a bot that was questioning her Christian credentials. It's not Alex Stein in a Dog the Bounty Hunter wig. It's literally Marjorie Taylor Greene. All right, so it seems to me that we are being blocked from taking calls. I fixed it on my end, so we'll just wait and see. But I think we're good. So if you want to call in. Now let's get back to my notes. I've been earmarking a lot of things on Twitter. There's so much going on right now. So this is the IPS Deprogram for 5/25/2025, the 5th anniversary of the George Floyd, Derek Chauvin event. Again, George Floyd's not dead. He's hanging out with Ashley Babbitt. They probably got a kid by now. Okay, it says allow phone. Look. I think I got him on the phone. I don't see any issues here on my end. So go ahead and speak, caller, if you hear me.
Hello?
Okay, we have
Hello?
Hey, what's up? We have contact. Thank you. Thank you for calling.
All right, cool. Hey, this is Jurassic.
Hey, what's up, Jurassic?
Hello?
Yeah, what exactly are you calling about today?
Oh, yeah. First, I want to talk to you about the that plane crash. Did you talk about that? About the in San Diego?
The plane crash in San Diego. No, which one was this one?
This was just recent. Like it was like 2 days ago, or like 2 days ago. There was there was no famous people except for one who was, I don't even know who the hell he is, but he was a drummer for a band. I'll tell you the name in a minute. But so you didn't talk about it, right?
No, I have not talked about it yet.
Okay, so check this out, because it has a connection to something else, which I'll bring up at the end. But so here's what it is. So it supposedly crashed into a military housing area where they house military people, like families, and so it like really damaged like a bunch of like the whole block. It wasn't just like one house like you see, because it was like a small jet, I guess, not just like a little airplane. But anyway, so they made a big deal of it on the news. But
Okay, I'm looking here. I'm seeing tons of headlines. It looks like a scene out of Donnie Darko. Plane crash startles San Diego community. It says here, death toll rises, houses set on fire, family escapes fiery plane crash. They look like actors. Okay, yeah, that's a big scene. Tierra Santa.
Okay.
Tierra Santa. Go ahead.
Yeah, Tierra Santa. And Tierra, even though it's not spelled correctly, Tierra is like a crown. The tiara, like a woman wears a tiara, like a crown. And Santa is Satan. Okay? So, follow where I'm going with this. So you have the Tierra Santa, which is like Satan crown. And then it was a Cessna 550, which is 55 is Satan, and then a crown, because 550, 55 with the number 0 or the letter O is like a crown. Satan equals 55. And then the numbers on the plane, there was 3 letters and 3 numbers. The letters were N, S, and D, and the numbers were 666. Okay?
Okay. This is.
Are you following?
Yes, I'm following you on this one. I see it too.
Yeah. And 6 people died, another 6. So far, I don't know if there's more that died, but there was 6 on the plane. And guess who the drummer was? From what band? You don't know, right?
No, I don't. It says influential music exec. Who is it? Who was it?
Well, no, forget the exact. The other one is the drummer. He was from the Devil Wears Prada.
Here it is. Devil Wears Prada drummer. Okay, so you got Devil 666. You got the Satan. You got Santa's tiara, or Satan's tiara.
Yeah. And the craziest part is coming. This guy survived a shooting that happened back in 2019. Can you guess the date that he survived the shooting?
Probably 8/4, but what date?
Yeah, August 4th, 2019. It was the Ned Pepper shooting where 9 people were shot.
Oh my God,
in Ohio.
Ohio. Ned Pepper is one of my favorite shootings.
Yeah.
That's the one where there was like a big pile of shoes in the middle of the street. That was the same weekend as the Garlic Festival shooting. And then you had the Patrick Crusius in El Paso. And all these shootings had the same shooter. Like the guy looked the same. It's just weird. But so he was at the Ned Peppers. That tells you it's a psyop right there.
Yeah.
Great connections.
Can you believe that?
Great connections. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Total. Yeah, there's no way I can believe. Anyway, let's just say, who knows whether it really happened? We don't. We're skeptical of everything.
Right, exactly. But the fact of it is here is that we're looking at things that are heavily promoted that you can't miss. And I'm looking at the pictures of it, and of course, is this fakeable? Well, we have been seeing a lot of these ever since Leave the World Behind. But with the plane crashes, the helicopter crashes, yeah, of course they can fake this stuff. We have to remember their capability of faking stuff. But in this case, and there's something else. I think I talked about this last time. There was that satellite that was sent to Venus that just crashed down to Earth. And it correlated with the movie where a Russian satellite falls to Earth. And in the movie, Megalopolis, the Statue of Liberty is in front of it when you see this Russian satellite falling. So my connection here was the Russian satellite going to Venus, Lucifer. So there's this like idea here of the man who fell to Earth. Like Elvis, of course, they sent him into space, or rather, is Bowie, but the whole Starman thing. It all ties into this man who fell to Earth. So you're bringing up here Tierra Santa, the idea of 666, like whatever it is, it's definitely consistent here in its general story.
Yeah, man. I mean, I just call for that, man. I don't even. My brain is overloaded with information, man. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, let me run one more thing by you. So that Final Destination movie opens where they're on the opening night of the Space Needle. And just 2 days ago, the Seattle Space Needle opened their Skyliner double-decker full-glass elevator, the only one of its kind in North America. So what are the odds here that the Space Needle is going to open its elevator and have a big ceremony just like in the movie? And it's just another example here. They're building something up here, and this Space Needle imagery is central to a lot of what we're seeing. So anyway, we're just a few weeks out.
And it was a twin connection with the twin elevators. Like, it's basically saying like two of them are going up to heaven, like two, you know what I mean? Like Elvis, Trump, you get what I'm saying? You know, like.
Well, let me run this by you
elevator.
then. Because Mickey 17, the movie Mickey 17, has Mark Ruffalo, who plays Trump. Like, it's quite obvious. And he gets shot at. The bullet grazes his cheek, leaves a blood streak, and he poses for the cameras. But the shooter's Mickey 17, and he's a clone. And he's hanging out with Mickey 18. So it hit me. It's like, okay, twins involved in this assassination of Trump scene, which was based on Butler in many ways. But anyway, twins again.
Yeah, man. And that whole Butler thing, yeah. And Austin Butler playing Elvis. I mean, it's too many connections, you know, with this Butler, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, I appreciate the information. That's a lot of great intel about the plane crash. I'll dig into it. And the fact that this guy's connected with Ned Peppers and Devil Wears Prada with Meryl Streep. We'll have to look into this stuff. But yeah, great connections here. Thanks for the call, and thanks for your patience getting through here.
All right, take care.
All right, everyone, that's Jurassic Liars. And if you want to find his videos, go to autohoax.com, where you will find the Auto Hoax Report, and his videos show up in the top middle. Pippi Langstruff says, JL is Elvis. He's more likely Elvis than that Pastor Bob Joyce, who's impersonating Elvis on X. The Q people think he's Elvis. Now, this just caught my eye. In Pearl Harbor 2001, the director, Michael Bay, digitally inserted Bruce Willis into the background of a scene. So what is the significance of it? As John McClane. What is the significance of this? Well, it's this. Pearl Harbor came out right before 9/11, and it featured planes attacking America, and America Fights Back, patriotism, heroes, and all of that. When 9/11 happened, it was called this generation's Pearl Harbor. And again, Pearl Harbor was on December 7th, like 9/11, Building 1, Building 2, Building 7, 127. There's some connections that we could go into here, but predictive programming wise. They released Pearl Harbor right before 9/11 to make these correlations. So I've looked at the movie Pearl Harbor as, more feeding into what was about to go down. But Bruce Willis being inserted into this, what could that possibly mean? And my best guess on this is that Bruce Willis is associated with exploding buildings. With those various movies he was in, Die Hard, but the exploding buildings, exploding planes, jet fuel is one of the main characters. How many movies, action movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, were featuring burning jet fuel as one of the main characters? And so seeing Bruce Willis in this, I don't know. I could be reaching, but I associate him with exploding planes, jet fuel, and exploding buildings. But it's one of these channels I follow. It's called the Synesthetic. And it just finds these little nuances and Easter eggs with these old movies. Piano Andente says, Meryl Streep is Presley Term. Oh, an anagram. I love anagrams. They use them all over the place in these psyops. I Can't Breathe is an anagram for A Better China. Leave the World Behind. That's an anagram for Behold the End War Live. I guess you could also have Behold the End War Live makes sense. Because see, the movie, if you haven't seen Leave the World Behind, the character Rose is based on Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is based on Trump. The movie ends where Rose goes into the bunker. So Donnie Darko. And she watches the end, how it ends, the end of the series Friends. But she's also watching essentially the end of the world from the bunker through the screen. So she's watching it live. And you see her eye, and I think at the end of the movie, the nukes hit. So Behold the End World Live is about how when they deployed the nukes, everyone's going to lock down. So we're going to be watching it on TV, is what that means. The end war will be on TV. It'll be experienced as a simulation. All right, I'm scrolling through my feed, make sure I haven't missed anything. George Floyd's anniversary. The name Derek Chauvin, yeah, he's just a character. They worked together. Look, if this was real, George Floyd would have said, hey, Derek, what are you doing? You've been kneeling on my neck for 8 minutes here, and we've been working together for 17 years, or 7 years, because he was 17 years a cop. For 7 years. Like, you'd think they'd have some rapport. And third parties at the time, it said they were friends. So it's a little strange that you would kneel on your friend's neck. But the name Derek, if you trace the etymology, it goes back to a hangman who hanged 3,000 people. 3,000, 9/11 code, Twin Cities, Twin Towers, 8:46 a.m., 8:46. We've talked about these connections between these two events, the 9/11ing of America, which is what happened again 5 years ago. But the name Derek comes from a hangman, and is part of a crane called the Derrick. And then at the time, the Proud Boys were rising up in opposition to BLM and the Antifa. So you got Antifa soy boys versus the Proud Boys. And the Proud Boys were Western chauvinists. So Derek Chauvin, epitomizing the defenders, the structural inequality and the oppression. And he's defending the propertied class. So you have this class warfare storyline built into that event where he represents this Western chauvinism, kneeling on the poor because it has to in order to survive as a system because it's parasitic. So it's all built into it. Derek Western chauvinism, kneeling on the neck of the poor can't breathe. And then they extrapolate this to climate change. The West is destroying the climate, so Gaia can't breathe. So I Can't Breathe has a deeper meaning, and it has to do with space, and the space being denied, the oppression, the atmosphere being destroyed. And now it's even tying into environmentalism in space and space junk, because Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, rich individuals based on their access are going to be disproportionately wrecking entire systems, both online cyberspace and low Earth orbit space, and the air we breathe. Jurassic Liar says, from the birth of Elvis to the exact day of Pearl Harbor is 6 years and 11 months. Again, 6/11, it's an upside down 9/11, and these are not insignificant. 113 is infused throughout various Pixar films, and they explain what it means in Wall-E. And if you haven't seen Wall-E, it repackages Noah's Ark and the flood, but it's the flood which is the result of climate change, and the Ark is the spaceship that man goes into. And you find out that the president puts on a mask and he announces Directive 113, which means abandon the Earth. So 113, mask, quarantine, going into the bunkers, going on to the spaceship. And the spaceship was run, and this is a 2001 or Space Odyssey 2001 reference. The spaceship was run by a robot called Otto. And Otto was basically HAL 9000. Deprogram Truther says, I missed the notification. I'm way behind now. Well, we've been live here for 2 hours and 1 minute. You get notifications. Just sign up. If you go to the Substack, I send out notifications. I try to send it like half an hour in advance if I can. And as soon as I have the budget, we'll go back to text alerts. There's a couple things I have to pay first, but text alerts were always good for getting an influx of people in right away. Pippi Langstrup says we need a game show. Well, we live in a game show. It's a rigged game show. It's also a magic show. And most people don't know it's a magic show. All right, I'm continuing to scroll through my notes. I'm making sure I haven't missed anything. The book that I published, The Chemtrail Hoax, is number 18 in 30-minute science short reads on Twitter. I'm sorry, on Amazon. I posted links to it on Twitter. I've been advertising it. So I wrote a book debunking chemtrails. And I think it was important to do this because it unpacks a lot of logical fallacies that if you get rid of those, then similar conspiracy theories won't latch on. And then someone is selling this. I don't think any of you need it. It's Gullible Gina, upgraded formula. And this was developed with dermatologists. This is the MAGA ear regrow cream. And 3 drops is all it takes. And then a stupidly large bandage. And your ear will regrow in 10 days. This is the upgraded formula, Gullible Gina. Archie Fisher says Seattle coordinates are 47.6 and 122.3 west. The opposite coordinates 42.4 north, 180. Okay, what are you saying? Oh, I see. These coordinates lead to Uzbekistan, closest town, nuke us. Okay, nuke us. You know what I like about that is there's this story that we've been following with, and I need to watch it, the movie Rust, which is a Western, and it had that shooting with Alec Baldwin where he murdered that chick and then shot the guy. And we were talking about the connections between Helena Hutchins, her name, and Ukraine, where she was from, and Hunt for Red October, which had Alec Baldwin, which has to do with this nuclear submarine, a nuke that was lost. That's what the Red October is. And how he kind of forms a bridge here because he's in a movie that involves her hometown and then he shoots her. So we were looking at these different connections with the nuke scenario and what it might mean with the Rust, the Western. And I think there is some symbolism here with this shooting happening in this chapel. But Tom Clancy, it should also be mentioned, wrote Sum of All Fears And Tom Clancy is credited with having presciently forecasted many of the psyops like 9/11. Like his books were prophetic. But we know what they are. His books are predictive programming. And when 9/11 happened on the space station, if you can believe this, and if you're not a skeptic and you believe in the space stuff, then you have to believe in a lot of garbage. And I don't envy that. Like, you actually have to believe this. If you believe the space station's real, 9/11 happened as reported, if you believe this stuff, then here's one of the ridiculous things that you must also believe. Because you can't cherry pick from your TV Bible, from your broadcast worldview. If you're just going to accept it all, you have to accept every piece of it. So on 9/11, 2001, on the ISS, one of the astronauts said that they were sitting around listening to a Tom Clancy audiobook. They were listening to Tom Clancy, Sum of All Fears. And one of them looked out the window at New York, and they saw 9/11 happening from space. And they said, wow, it's just like the book. And then this American astronaut brings out a trumpet, and he starts playing taps. So again, you can believe all that if you want to. What a coincidence. They happen to be listening to an audiobook that describes a 9/11-like scenario, and it happens, and they see it from 300 miles above as it happens. He sees the smoke. He's like, oh, it must be Osama bin Laden. What a joke. Again, you can get all the links at ips.monster. If you look on the screen, I have my crack Gwyn. Every time you donate, support this channel, it's not going to me. It's actually feeding this, the crack Gwyn. And this is what the raft will eventually become once there are enough of us. And why the penguin? The penguin was adopted as a mascot for our channel because it represents what's beyond the perimeter, the edge. If there is an edge, they would know. So they're sort of on the outside, but also kind of insiders and the big secrets, if there are any. The emperor penguin is the deepest diving bird. And the idea of deep diving into these stories has a relationship with that notion. And then they live in a desert, an area that's cold and dark. And I think darkness is a good symbol of ignorance and the ice, secrecy. And then penguins in the ice, in the cold, will form a circle and they conspire, which is they breathe together. So they all breathe into the middle and it creates a hot pocket of air. So it's like a campfire effect that they create. And I think that's kind of relevant to what we're doing because we are essentially conspiring. The idea of the heat against the cold or the fire against the darkness. In other words, you're trying to combat the enforced ignorance. That's what conspiracy theories are really doing. But there are just various ways that the penguin seems to be the perfect description. And then we arrive at this new age of misinformation flooding us thanks to AI. And so I look back to Aldous Huxley and this idea of the misinformation flood, the deluge, where there's so much information that truth becomes irrelevant. And so you have the sea of irrelevance, is what he called it. So it's like, yeah, it's true that Donald Trump faked an assassination attempt, but that truth is irrelevant because there's so much misinformation that drowns it. But when penguins gather on the water, they call it a raft, which is why we describe this as a raft. And the idea of the raft is that we are buoyant atop the sea of irrelevance. And if you're not on the raft, you're submerged in misinformation. Okay, we will continue this conversation tomorrow. I'm going to catch up on the archives and everything else. I'm going to follow up on some of the leads. Michelle K had actually posted here, did you go back and watch the Elvis scene in White Noise? No, I did not. But now I have to. And you know, when they were filming the Elvis movie, the director said that before every music scene, they blasted Kanye West's Black Skinhead. How does that make sense? What's the point? There's a whole other story here that connects Elvis to Bowie to Kanye West, but we don't have time for it right now. But we'll continue this stuff later. Always entertaining, and these are interesting times. So I'm glad that we have our think tank still integrated here. And this is a long, surviving and thriving think tank, and we've made consistent improvements. We haven't backslid. None of us are mandoozled. None of us have been reinfected. This is mind war inoculation. And once you get that, you're cured for life. I don't think you could go back. It's like you see a magic trick, like mind-blowing magic tricks, like where they pull their thumbs off. And once you know how they do it, it's like no longer beguiling. All right, we'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks for the comments. I'll send out notifications shortly.
Dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes. My body, my body and me. Telecommunications Act of 1996. 96, y'all. Gonna filter your eyes and scrub your mind. The weatherman, he's just another bad joke. You can be a doomed little donkey like Eeyore. I'ma be an auto hoax, and it feels so good. Just ought to believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis actor with soulless eyes. Got no heart, ain't got no soul. Secrets, symbols, numbers, planets, etc.